It's Wednesday, and you all know what that means. It's time for another episode of the Life in the Movies podcast with Ryan and Jacob. I am one of your co-hosts. My name is Ryan Cam. Thank you all so much for tuning in. This week, in honor of Easter Sunday, he has risen, praise be. Jacob and I are going to be discussing some Easter movies and just faith-based movies in general. It should be a lot of fun. We'll also be covering episode 4 of Daredevil and episode 2 of Moon Knight. Got a lot to unpack, but first I got to introduce my main man, my co-host, Jacob Martin. Jacob, how you doing?
I'm doing really good, Ryan. I actually, at the time of filming this video, which was on a Monday, I actually just returned home from a camping trip with my family. We were camping in a local state park in our area. We normally, when it's springtime, we would normally hike and do some kayaking on the lake, but it was strangely cold this past weekend. Like, it was mostly in the 50s. It was windy. We didn't really feel like going out much because it was so cold and breezy. So we mainly just stayed inside, played games. Of course, in our camper, we have water and electric, so we can take a small TV and watch stuff in the camper. So we just had a fun time in the camper. Thankfully, this past Sunday, it was decent enough where we did a family hike, and it was really cool, and we got to see some beautiful scenery in the lake, and we were able to walk on this cool little island, which was really awesome. So at least we had that, but for the most part, it was a pretty mostly indoor camping trip.
Yeah, well, in Florida, there's not really much camping to be had, so sounds like it's better than nothing at all.
Yeah. So how has your week been, Ryan?
It's been going really well. By the time this airs, it will be a few days out from the Easter Beach Run. I've talked about it a couple times on the show, and I am looking forward to doing it and slaying the dragon, if you will. Then after I get done with the race, well, just to spoil my next big thing I'm doing, in the second week of June, from June 10th to the 16th, I'm going to be in Utah seeing my good friend Rachel. I'm going to vacation out to see her. And then on the 11th, I'm going to be taking part in the Great Salt Lake open swim race. I believe that's what it's called. It's a 1 mile swim in the Great Salt Lake. And it's something that I normally don't do. I love to swim, and I have and I've loved to swim before. However, I've never really done something like this, but I've always said that this year was going to be the year where I push myself, and nothing says pushing yourself like swimming in a massive lake, I suppose.
Man, that sounds awesome. You get to meet one of your other co-hosts that you do with Rachel. I can't wait to hear more about this. I'm sure you'll share some pictures and videos and other fun stuff on social media. I'm definitely excited to hear about this.
Yeah, it's been a long time coming because we've just been friends for a good 2 years now, almost a half years. It's been crazy to think about because, people talk about COVID and how bad a time it was. And I mean, yeah, I can't blame them for that, but I've made several great friends along the way. I've made friends with you. I've made friends with Rachel. I made friends with other people in this YouTube movie sphere that I would have never met if it hadn't been for COVID to a certain degree. So it was a very dark time, but there was some bright spots. Or every cloud has a silver lining and all of that.
Yeah, considering people tended to hate on 2020, and it was a pretty rough year, there were still a lot of blessings. And even on my end, my channel grew in 2020. And then I was lucky enough, to not to keep a job during that, because most people were unemployed because they were locked down. I was I was first a delivery driver, but unfortunately that shut down. I found another job as an order builder. So I was lucky to still be able to work even throughout the pandemic and still be able to, provide even during such a dark time. There was still quite a bit of good blessings, even with all the darkness that came during that very rough year.
Yeah, and I believe I'm one of those types that believes that, and I please like don't attack me for saying this, all of you out there, but I'm one of those that believes that we're living in some pretty fortunate times. And I know a lot of you are going to be coming back with, have you seen the news lately? I am fully aware of the real world problems that a lot of us face. I face a lot of them too. However, if you take a look through history and you compare it to now, I'd much rather live here and now than back in like say 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s. I mean, the movies, a lot of the movies were better back then. A lot of the music was better back then. But I don't want to live in like the shadow of Vietnam or the Cold War or anything like that. That just sounds like not super great at all. So I'm grateful to live in the times that we live, warts and all. I don't know about all of you, but that's probably my most controversial opinion, is that we live in pretty swell times, despite every piece of evidence to the contrary.
Yeah, I definitely agree because, even though there was some cool stuff in the past, what I love about today is, we have better technology, we have better healthcare, we have all that stuff that, wasn't possible in the past. And so even though there's challenges in each generation, there's always a glimmer of hope going forward to keep the ball going. And that's, I guess, we got to look for the good things and not all the negative that you would see in like social media or the news outlets and other stuff like that.
Yeah, it's incredibly easy to like see on social media or the news or something like that and just see, geez, everything is just the worst. But if you crack open a history book, any history book from any angle, you'll probably find something similar to what's going on now, but probably worse. Like COVID, yeah, COVID was very bad, and it should be taken seriously, and I believe a lot of us did. However, if you look up the stats from like the Spanish flu or something far worse than that, it was far worse. And that's why when people say 2020 was like the worst year ever, I wholeheartedly disagree. Like, you're talking about years like 1938 when the Nazis invaded Poland. You're talking about like 1928 when the Great Depression first happened. It's all about perspective, I guess. And
Mhm.
so it's important to remember that stuff happened before us and stuff will happen after us. So,
Yeah, I agree.
but anyway, let's descend from the soapbox and dive into some movie stuff. So, Jacob, what have you been watching recently?
Well, I actually put a pause on some of the videos on my channel while I was gone. But I did have a few videos I wanted to share. A recent movie that I watched on my Wes Anderson director project. I collabed with Esley Greer from the channel Entertainment Fanatic Reviews, and we watched Fantastic Mr. Fox, and this was my introduction to Wes Anderson as a filmmaker. This was a pretty good gateway for me in stop motion because I had been a fan of stop motion prior to this with some of Tim Burton's movies. Of course, I grew up with the Rankin Bass Christmas specials, which are iconic. But watching Fantastic Mr. Fox, which I sadly did not see in theaters, I think it wasn't until about 2014 when I first watched it. It really made me appreciate stop motion all the more because the detail Wes Anderson put into this movie, it's one of the most visually brilliant pieces of animation I've ever seen. There's no animated movie that looks like Fantastic Mr. Fox. It's just Wes Anderson in his own quirky little world, and I love what he brought visually to this movie. Of course, I love the voice cast, whether George Clooney, Meryl Streep, Jason Schwartzman, Bill Murray. Everyone is fantastic in their animated roles. It's based off a Roald Dahl book. I have not read the book, but I'll probably cover it soon on my second channel because I'm curious about reading it. But I feel like the movie, even though I haven't read the book, it definitely felt like a good mix of the dark humor you expect in a lot of Roald Dahl stories with the quirky style of Wes Anderson. It was a really cool little blend, which makes it not only one of my favorite Wes Anderson movies, but one of my favorite Roald Dahl movie adaptations in general, which is saying something because I've never read the book. I think this movie's a blast. I love the characters. I love the charm. I love the comedy. The soundtrack, probably my favorite soundtrack in any Wes Anderson movie. I just think this movie is a whole lot of fun, and I'd say probably top three Wes Anderson. I'll have to revisit some others to determine that on the project, but I know for certain that this is in my top three.
Yeah, this is definitely top three Wes Anderson for sure. I love this movie. I've seen it so many times. Even though Moonrise Kingdom is probably my favorite Wes Anderson, this is the one that I've seen the most by a country mile. And this cast is so loaded. Like you can't like look up and down this list and see like, oh, star here, star there, star here, star there. And they all fit. It's not like certain animated movies where it's like a celebrity's voice clearly coming out of something that just doesn't fit them. Like they all work so well. It's everything just meshes perfectly. And you mentioned the soundtrack. This soundtrack is just it's probably one of my favorite soundtracks of all time. Like it is so good. Like from the beginning where you see Mr. Fox like under the tree listening to the Davy Crockett. I love that. I love that part.
Yeah.
I love the snappy dialogue between every character in here. No one just everyone says everything with just like charisma levels on 10. Like there is not an uninteresting line in this entire thing, even when they're cussing at each other because to get around them saying swear words. It's the funniest thing ever.
What the curse are they burning?
Are you cussing me?
Are you cussing with me? That is one of my favorite running gags in any animated movie. It is absolutely brilliant. Also, shout out to the Bobby Fuller Four, who has the song Let Her Dance at the end of the movie. That is like the best song I've ever heard in a Wes Anderson movie. It is like the perfect song to wrap up one of his films that fits his style. It fits the quirkiness that he brings in all his movies. And it fits the ending of the movie so well with where the characters are at. I love the use of that song in the movie.
Yeah, another good use of a song is Street Fighting Man by the Rolling Stones. Just
Yes.
hearing that riff, it was like, wait, did V for Vendetta just end? Because it plays at the end credits of V for Vendetta, but that's another good song in there as well. And yeah, the Wes Anderson really just put his heart and soul into this. And I love this. I love the monologue that Mr. Fox gives where he's like, I thought it was going to be the fantastic Mr. Fox, and like in front of the waterfall. That one's really good. I love the ending one where it's Mr. Fox and the wolf and they raise the fists. I love that. You could just do an entire essay on like dissecting every scene in this, and it would just like you would never run out of good things to say about it.
Yeah, it was such a fun movie. I think it's actually one that's grown on me the more I've watched it too. Because when I first watched it, although I was blown away with the animation, I liked it, but I didn't fully get it. But it's one where the more I've revisited it, the more I've just appreciated it more and more. To now, it's one of my favorite animated movies.
Well, anyway, what else do you have?
All right, what else do I got? Well, uh, to commemorate to get into the Easter season for celebrating Disney, I recently watched one of the few Easter themed movies that's in the world of animation. Like the only two like full blown Easter movies I can think of at the top of my head. Illumination did a movie a while back called Hop, which literally involves Easter bunnies. And the movie I'm talking about today is the Disney film. They did a Winnie the Pooh movie in 2004 called Springtime with Roo. And in this movie, Roo is excited to celebrate Easter and be involved in the Easter egg hunt with all the characters in the 100 Acre Wood. However, Rabbit, who is usually the Easter Bunny in the 100-Acre Wood, decides to halt Easter this year and instead host Spring Cleaning Day. He wants all the characters to clean up his house, which to me, this doesn't make sense. Like, why would he force all the characters to clean up his house? But that's another story for another day. It turns out Rabbit is actually bitter about Easter because he feels like Tigger upstaged his job the previous year, and now he wants nothing to do with Easter over jealousy. So the movie ends up turning into a loose adaptation of A Christmas Carol, pretty much, where Rabbit ends up Scrooge. He wants nothing to do with Easter. He makes the holiday miserable for everybody else, and it's up to characters like Roo, Tigger, and even the narrator to, scare Rabbit into appreciate and learning the error of his ways and learning what Easter means for everybody else. Now, I'm a big fan of the Winnie the Pooh movies. I love the original Winnie the Pooh. It's one of the most charming Disney films ever made. And there are some very underrated movies in the Winnie the Pooh franchise. The Winnie the Pooh film from 2011, the Tigger movie, it's fantastic. It's surprisingly an emotional story for Tigger as a character. And even Pooh's Grand Adventure, which I would argue is the darkest Winnie the Pooh movie of all time, but it's still a highly entertaining adventure nonetheless. Springtime with Rue is one where I like the parts, but it's definitely not as memorable. Like, I like some of the humor that's in it. I liked where I think it was going with it. I think the Easter aspect was done okay. And I think for its target audience, I think the movie is fine, but it's definitely not one that sticks the landing compared to some of the other Winnie the Pooh films. I don't think the songs are as memorable. I don't think the humor is as consistent. I don't think the message is as endearing, and the story is a lot more predictable because it's pretty much a Christmas Carol with an Easter setting with Winnie the Pooh characters. This one is more of a meh Winnie the Pooh movie for me, but Winnie the Pooh is still Winnie the Pooh, and even the lesser films still have its effort, I guess, put into it. And it's a serviceable movie, I guess, for what it is.
Talk about false advertising. Hey, it's Easter. Never mind, we're cleaning. It was like, some friend you are, Rabbit. Like, what in the world?
Yeah, that's a weird, that was a weird story, too, because the movie in the flashbacks, as we look into Rabbit's past, because it borrows a lot from A Christmas Carol, the movie greatly implies it wants you to believe that Rabbit is the legit Easter bunny. Like, which was really weird because there's a musical number where he's making eggs and he's shipping them. And I was like, I thought you were Christopher Robin's toy. Why do you have this complex that you're the real Easter bunny? And it just got really weird at times. It did some things that, I'm not the biggest fan of, but well, it is what it is.
Yeah.
We're recording this on a Monday, and the video that's just dropping on my channel that I'm going to share. I did rewatch recently Fantastic Beast and Where to Find Them. I wanted to revisit the Fantastic Beast movies before The Secrets of Dumbledore, the new one, came out. And rewatching it again, the movie's okay. It's definitely nowhere near as excellent as any of the 8 Harry Potter movies. But if you're looking at this as like an offshoot spinoff, it's not that bad. I like the characters for what they are. I especially like the quirkiness of Eddie Redmayne as Newt Scamander. The story of him, in a place he's not as familiar with, his creatures accidentally escape, and he has to catch the creatures. Yeah, people joke that it was like Pokemon Go in the Wizarding World, but that was kind of fun. I enjoyed that storyline, and it was cool seeing all these various creatures in the universe. And I like seeing a different side of the Wizarding World in this movie where we get to see, like, the Wizarding World in New York set in a different time period. And I like the visual aesthetic of this movie. And I enjoyed the performances overall. I liked especially the addition of Dan Fogler as Jake Kowalski, because I like that we got to see a muggle's first reaction into the whole wizarding world thing. Something we didn't really see fully explored in any of the Harry Potter movies. We've seen muggles in the wizarding world, but we haven't seen like their initial reactions before. So it was fun seeing it in this Fantastic Beasts movie. I will say my big issue with it is it's very disjointed in tone because we got the Newt Scamander plot line where he's catching all these fantastic beasts. And it's very lighthearted and whimsical and all that. And then we have this subplot with Grindelwald on the loose, and there's like this anti-witch hunt going on in New York, and there's like this extreme lady that's torturing all these wizard kids. One of them is the character Credence, played by Ezra Miller. And I was like, these stories are just so off in tone that they don't mesh well together. And to me, it just led to like this lack of stakes. They do bridge together in the end. And I do like the third act and the resolution, the payoff, and the setup for the next movies. But for a while, like these two stories are so incompatible with one another that I was just like, where is this story going? Where is this story going? Is it getting anywhere? It feels like I'm watching two different movies, and that's why I've always been alienated with aspects of this movie. I like individual parts, but I just don't think it was fully meshed well together. It's a movie. I feel like I've only had the urge to rewatch these Fantastic Beasts movies whenever a new one comes out. I don't rewatch these near as much as the Harry Potter movies. I guess they're fine for what they are, but something about them is off compared to how awesome the Harry Potter stuff were.
I couldn't agree with you more. The Fantastic Beasts movies, my main problem with them is just I feel like they're completely separate. And even though they're technically in the same universe as Harry Potter, they couldn't be any more different, which is weird because the first Fantastic Beasts I like. I think it actually introduces some good ideas. But by the time Crimes of Grindelwald rolls around, it's almost like that stuff goes completely out the window. Is like no American like wizarding order, no like the Fantastic Beasts side of things almost seems toned down today. I mean, like I've been hearing the marketing for this for the past couple of weeks. They barely say Fantastic Beasts. They just say The Secrets of Dumbledore in theaters now. It just is like, guys, did we all forget that this was Fantastic Beasts? And I have a feeling I know exactly where this story is headed. The Grindelwald is going to be portrayed as basically the Hitler of the magical world, and it's going to be like World War II in the Muggle world and the Great Wizarding War like running in conjunction with each other. If it's not going to happen in Secrets of Dumbledore, then it's going to happen in the next one. But that's my grand unifying theory, if you will.
I think my big problem too was that I think this was originally meant to be a trilogy, but then J.K. Rowling stopped was like, no, let's milk this as much as possible. Let's extend it to five. And I've already rewatched Crimes of Grindelwald already, so I'll share my brief thoughts on it real quick. My main problem with Crimes of Grindelwald was it felt like a setup filler movie to the next film. It was 2 hours where they set up a bunch of stuff, some of which I felt was completely unnecessary. It had an interesting setup to the next movie, and I'm curious where it's going to go in Secrets of Dumbledore, but why do we need this whole movie to set up everything when you could have condensed it and taken like two extended movies with such a thin premise and do it into one? And that's what confuses me and frustrates me about these movies.
Yeah, I would almost prefer if Newt Scamander had been this kind of like environmentalist, but in the wizarding world, just going around trying to protect these creatures from Grindelwald and his ways, but at the same time protecting him from Dumbledore because he's not exactly a big fan of his tactics either. I think that would be at least interesting, but instead it's like Fantastic Beasts, and then now they fully pivoted away from that, and the creature aspect is almost completely gone. Like exception of in Secrets of Dumbledore, they're gonna do the whole crab walk with the Rick Rude swivel thingamajigger, which I mean I mean, we're gonna see that. But outside of that, it's like, is Newt Scamander even looking for creatures anymore, or is he like Dumbledore's number two? Like, I need this explained, please.
Yeah, I guess we'll just have to see what happens. Like, I'm still enjoying Newt Scamander as a character, and one of the things that I've liked in these movies is his continued character growth. There was this one conversation in Crimes of Grindelwald that really struck me, where Dumbledore's like, "I like you because you don't seek power and you don't strive to do anything grand or anything. You just like to do what's right." And I like that whole attitude that he does have, that he is good friends with Dumbledore. He's Dumbledore's number two. He goes on these missions for him, but he's not trying to be this power hungry guy. He's not trying to seek fame or anything. Deep down, he's just a simple guy who cares for his creatures. And there's something about that I find a little bit cathartic. I actually do like his character throughout, but I do agree the Fantastic Beast aspect, while it was cool, it does feel a little sidelined in favor of the other stuff. But at the same time, I'm curious where the other movies are going to go because I'm such a fan of this Wizarding world, and I'm curious, what we're going to see going forward.
Yeah, it almost feels like they were. It almost feels like their whole plan was to do young Dumbledore and build up the whole Grindelwald thing, basically to the point where I believe it's in Sorcerer's Stone where we learn that Grindelwald was defeated in 1945.
Mm-hmm.
So I would have appreciated if they did like a young Dumbledore and they built it up to that. I feel like the Fantastic Beasts side of things was like, it kind of felt like just a foot in the door. And then once they got to a certain point, they were like, all right, let's crumple this up. Let's throw it away. Now let's get into the real story.
Yeah, it does kind of feel like that. It could have just made a whole Dumbledore origin story trilogy you know if that's what they wanted to, but it's such a weird direction too because you got the Fantastic Beast and then the second one was all about Grindelwald, and I guess number three is going to be Dumbledore centric. When's Newt going to be the focus again? And number five, I don't. This is the most inconsistent way of storytelling since the Book of Boba Fett.
Yeah. Well, at the very least, Dumbledore will be in a lot of his own movie, unlike Boba Fett, who wasn't in an entire episode of his own show. But that's another rant for another time. One final note. One final note before we do move on is that regardless of everything going on with these movies, they got two things right. They got Jude Law cast as Dumbledore, great, and they got Mads Mikkelsen as Grindelwald, even better. So at least the casting department deserves a raise. That's my period at the end of the sentence.
I don't know. I'll miss Johnny Depp though. He was a great addition to that second movie, but Mads is pretty good too. We'll see what happens.
I mean, considering that whole situation, that's well above my pay grade, I will not be commenting on here. Uh, if they had to get anyone, I'm glad it was Mads Mikkelsen because that dude has never done a bad performance that I've seen of his anyway.
Yeah, he is a great actor. And then the last movie I'm going to share, going back to my Ivan Reitman series, which I just recently started, a movie that I just checked out for the first time is the 1979 comedy Meatballs, which is known for also starring Bill Murray in his feature film debut. Bill Murray plays a camp counselor named Tripper who runs this low rent or low grade summer camp. It's like the cheapo summer camp where they don't really they don't have the best equipment, and it's more about Bill Murray goofing off in front of the other kids, and they just do whatever they want. The movie is pretty much episodic in structure, as it's kids in this summer camp. Bill Murray has a crush on a female counselor, and he's trying to ask her out and all that. Bill Murray befriends a little boy named Rudy, and he helps gain the kid confidence because he's a loner. And there's a story going on there. It's like the Olympics between the summer camp that we're following mixed with the summer camp with all the rich privileged kids, and we get the underdog story of the characters we follow striving to beat the other kids. It's a fun little movie for what it is. I think it did a good job of mixing, that it's a family comedy, but there's a little bit of adult humor sprinkled in there as well because there's not only are there kids at the camp, but there's teenagers as well. So you can do a little bit more edgy humor in this because there's a bunch of kids at this summer camp, and then you got the Bill Murray who's just no, who's always goofing off and just having the time of his life. Bill Murray is great in this movie. He was funny even in movie one. If you have not seen this movie, go look up the speech where Bill Murray says it just doesn't matter. And it's one of the funniest things you'll ever see Bill Murray in. That improv speech that he gives was one part inspiring, two parts hilarious, and another part, how did he come up with this out of nowhere and still turn out great? I think this movie is a blast to watch. I definitely felt nostalgic and relatable to this because I went to some summer camps as a kid, more so church camps. So I wasn't in some like wild scenarios of some of the characters in this movie, but I still resonated with the setting and I felt very nostalgic watching this movie. I would definitely consider this a true hidden gem in Ivan Reitman's filmography. And if you can find it, I highly recommend it. It is so entertaining to watch.
Yeah, and this is Bill Murray's directorial, or not directorial, but acting
His
debut,
acting debut.
and he's still going today. So that's like nearly 40 years or over 40 years by this point.
Yeah, he was great in this movie, and I'm excited to see more of what the director has next in this project. All right, what
So,
have you watched?
so what I've been watching is well, mostly modern stuff. So I ended up seeing Sonic 2, and my full review of this is on the channel. So if you haven't checked it out, please do. But I really enjoyed this. And the first Sonic movie I liked, but I guess I liked it mostly because of the whole design controversy thing. And I guess I was a little more lenient this time around. This time around I was like, all right, let's see what they got. Now that they got Knuckles and Tails, to the more iconic Sonic characters. And as someone who's not a super fan of Sonic, I really enjoyed this, like a lot more than I thought that I would. Uh, I've missed this Jim Carrey. This Jim Carrey is just awesome. This is as close to mid 90s Jim Carrey as we will ever see again. He is having the time of his life playing Dr. Eggman. Like, this casting director deserves a raise just for getting him. Like, this was a perfect casting choice. It wasn't perfect. The human elements were just not super great. I like James Marsden, but I wasn't a huge fan of his. There's an entire subplot at a wedding, which, oh my god, I was so close to like legit walking out. I was cringing so hard. I wanted to just like, God, just please make it end. You'll know it when you see it. But other than that, I thought this movie was actually quite enjoyable.
Yeah, again, I was out of town. There was no movie theater close to where I was, so I didn't get a chance to see Sonic 2, but I'm glad it's doing very well. I'm glad to see that people have responded to it incredibly well. And considering I was not the biggest fan of the first Sonic, mainly because two-thirds of this movie just did not feel like a Sonic movie to me. It was just, so hey, Sonic is just chilling on Earth in a buddy comedy with James Marsden. It became a Sonic movie in the third act, and I enjoyed that. But two-thirds of this movie, I'm like, what are you doing? You're just doing lazy storytelling so you can just stay Sonic, keep Sonic off of his main world. I'm glad that this one is doing a lot better. I'm glad that people have responded to it. I'm glad that it feels like it's keeping the essence of a Sonic game where you got Tails and Knuckles, and it's exploring more of his world. And I'm excited to see that unfold. And I do plan on seeing this movie real soon.
Also, another great casting choice was Idris Elba as Knuckles. I did not know that he was the perfect choice and the perfect voice for this character, but he knocked it out of the ballpark. It's Idris Elba, so of course.
Yeah, you can't go wrong with that at all.
Yeah, and then I ended up watching The Rocketeer for my Better Than You Remember video, which dropped on Sunday. And this movie is so awesome. Like, it's getting a lot of respect now, but it makes me sad that when this movie came out, it was kind of given the all right, whatever treatment. Because if this movie came out today, it would be on everyone's top 10 list, in my opinion, or at least it'd be on mine. This movie is fantastic. When people talk about underrated, like underrated Disney movies, underrated like comic book movies, this is automatically on my list because people forget this is actually based on a pulp comic created by Dave Stevens. And this came in the weird wave after Batman 89 of movies like The Shadow and The Phantom getting released because we were like, hey, Batman came out around the same time, so everybody must like those. And well, that was not the case. I feel like The Rocketeer was way, way, way ahead of its time. And I think if it was released today, it would have gotten a lot more love.
Yeah, I agree. The Rocketeer is so underrated. What I find really fascinating is Joe Johnston is the one who directed this movie. And then years later, he got attached to direct Captain America, the first Avenger in the MCU. And both movies are so similar. They both are set in the same time period. They both have your typical good versus evil type storytelling. And our main character is super heroic and patriotic, and he takes on Nazis. I think both movies definitely deserve more credit, especially the Rocketeer, because I feel like if we hadn't got the Rocketeer, we probably wouldn't have got the first Captain America movie, because I feel like the Rocketeer, a lot of the visual aesthetics were definitely embraced all the more in the first Captain America movie. So it's really cool that he did both movies. I do love the cast, especially Timothy Dalton as the villain, the Nazi spy. He completely embellished the role, and it's probably the most over the top I've ever seen him in. He's like a mix of Clark Gable, Errol Flynn, and like your stereotypical over the top bad guy in a lot of these old school movies. And he absolutely nailed it.
Yeah, he really did. He has one of my favorite lines in the movie where he's about to fly off from the rocket pack and he's like, "Goodbye, Jenny. I will miss you." And Jenny was like, "Everything you told me was a lie." And Neville was like, "It wasn't lies, Jenny. It was acting." Like, yeah, that's so
Yes.
good. And then he turned into the Human Torch 30 seconds after saying that, which is just one of the best villain deaths ever. It just, he gets the pack, he's flying out, he's like, ha 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 ha, and then boom, 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 and he just crashes down, knocking out the Hollywood land sign to just Hollywood. It's so good. The CGI is not super great, but it's 91, so I give him a bit of a benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, I actually need to revisit this movie again. I need to make a note to myself, put it in one of my next celebrating Disney videos down the line. You got me wanting to revisit it.
You should, and everyone else watching this should, because it's definitely better than you remember, even if you've seen it before. But to wrap up this portion of my what I've been watching lately, I saw the new Michael Bay movie Ambulance, and again, I have a full review of that on the channel if you'd like to check that out. But Michael Bay is a polarizing director. I don't think I'm controversial in saying that. He's made some good and a lot of bad, but thankfully, Ambulance is one of the good ones. This is actually a lot of fun. The movie knows exactly what it is. It's a bank heist movie, and it completely knocks it out of the ballpark. Jake Gyllenhaal, Yahya Abdul-Mateen II, and Isa Gonzalez are all fantastic. The action is good. There's some bad CGI, but I mean, it's like in one or two scenes. The rest is done practically, which I love practical stunt work so much. It's not even funny. And just, it's a bit too long. There is some stuff that I would definitely cut, but outside of that, this is definitely in my top 5 of the year so far.
Yeah, I definitely need to check out Ambulance too. I've heard nothing but good things about Ambulance. Of course, there's the people that don't care for this because they're in the camp. Oh, Michael Bay sucks. I don't want to see any more Michael Bay movies. But I definitely agree, Ryan. Like if he makes a good movie, then it deserves to be praised. Like I enjoy The Rock, Armageddon, The Island. I think is pretty underrated, and some of the Transformers sequels have their merits. Like I actually like Dark of the Moon is my personal favorite of the Bayformers Transformers movies because I think that's where he embraced all of the best aspects of how he does action, even though the story is a hot mess, but that's another story. I'm more intrigued to check out Ambulance because I was hoping it would be a good movie because I was impressed with the trailers. So I'm hoping it delivers as well, and it's one of the better Michael Bay movies. I'm glad you highly enjoyed this one, and I'm glad to hear that this is seen as one of his better films.
Yeah, like I said, when Michael Bay is on, he's just on fire. He's made a lot of crap, let's call it what it is, but he really did own this one. And just for the record, my favorite Transformers movie is the first one. And my order is the first one's really good. The second one is the worst of the series. I know you'll say, what about Last Night? What about Age of Extinction? Those are bad, but Revenge of the Fallen just annoyed me. The other two just bored me. Just I personally prefer being bored than annoyed, I guess. Third
I,
one third one was
oh,
actually
go ahead.
Third one was actually pretty good. Fourth one was just, oh, it was just so terribly long. And the fifth one was just Michael Bay saying, you know what? I just don't care anymore. Just throw whatever on the screen. Let's just get in and get out. That's my ranking at least.
Yeah, I actually have a pretty unpopular opinion of Transformers rankings. My favorite is, like I said, Dark of the Moon because I think that's has Michael Bay at his best when it comes to action. And then I felt the same way with Age of Extinction, which is why I have it at number two. I hate the extended runtime and the characters are annoying, but I'm impressed with the action that he provided in that. Though I'm not as annoyed by that one compared to the others. I have the first one at number three. I think that one is weird. I've never been the biggest fan of the first one. I like the setup, but I feel like it got too chaotic in the third act of where I was struggling to connect with these characters and where everything was happening because it was just so chaotic. And so that lost a lot of points for me personally. And then I got Revenge of the Fallen at number four. I hate that one. I've never been a fan of that one. The Last Night's my least favorite simply for the fact that, like you said, Ryan, it just felt like Michael Bay didn't care anymore. He just made the most nonsensical plot that made no sense. Did those weird aspect ratio shifts that just gave me a bad eye ache throughout. And just the whole thing with Optimus Prime going bad is like the way they resolve that is like the stupidest thing I've ever sat in a while. The stupidest thing I've ever seen in a while. I was just like, who greenlit this? And people said the Martha scene was bad. Optimus Prime literally goes from corrupt Optimus Prime and he goes good in 2 seconds just because Bumblebee talks. What?
Yeah, at least Martha is an attempt to make it work in the context of what's going on. It just Optimus Prime's term just he turns bad and turns back good just as quick, and it makes no sense. And I looked it up. This actually happens in Transformers lore, but it could have been done so much better. But at that point, I'm sure Michael Bay had just visibly checked out by that point. Is like, oh, you're going to give me $100 million to do it? All right, I'll see what I can do. Like that was the mindset. I am convinced of that.
And Michael Bay recently admitted to saying that he should have stopped after 3. That was his original plan, but the studio kept saying, "Hey, we'll pay you some money to make more so we can fund some of the movies you want to make." And he's like, "Okay, I'll make them, but I'm not going to make them any good. I'm not going to care."
Yeah, do you all know what was the highest grossing movie of 2014? Transformers: Age of Extinction. In the words of Nietzsche, God is dead and we killed him. Anyway, let's we'll talk about his son's resurrection in just a bit, but let's move on to talk about some Moon Knight and some Daredevil really quick. So we both ended up watching Moon Knight episode 2. I have a full review on the channel already, but Jacob, let you go first. What did you think of episode 2 of Moon Knight?
I thought it was pretty good. I don't think it grabbed me as much as the first episode did. The first episode, I was just blown away by its emphasis on doing something different, trying to be more horror centric compared to most of the MCU. This felt like typical MCU stuff where it was definitely a lot lighter. Characters joked a lot more. Not that that's a bad thing because that's what made the MCU such a success. It definitely felt jarring seeing a shift in tone in this episode, but I like that we started to see some questions being answered, more about the whole Moon Knight lore and the Moon Knight persona and how Steven and Mark cooperate as two different functions. I like the setup of where it's going, and it looks like in the next episodes we'll actually be seeing more Egyptian stuff related to Moon Knight and all the other characters within this world that I'm excited to see. This one to me was more of a setup episode, and I feel like the next episodes are going to be all payoff. But from what we got, I'm intrigued. I'm still enjoying the show. We got to see more of the Moon Knight costume, which I thought was really cool, and we see more of Ethan Hawke's character being explored and how he's more. I think it's implied that he was a Moon Knight as well, but he did bad, and he's now a fallen Moon Knight, and now he has a vendetta against like some of the Egyptian gods. I think how that's going to be explored between him and Oscar Isaac. I think just seeing them bounce off each other, I think is going to be so great, and I'm excited to see where that's going to go going forward. Overall, I thought it was a good episode. I don't think it's near as good as the first, but I'm still intrigued to see where the series is going to go.
Yeah, I actually ended up saying in my review that I have a theory that Ethan Hawke either was the Moon Knight at one point or wanted to be the Moon Knight and got passed over. So there's only 6 episodes in this show, so I hope that there is at least an answer to that question. But I actually like this episode more than the first one because it answered questions that I had from the first episode. I loved Moon Knight's. I'm going to call it his formal attire with just the mask and the suit and tie. I love that. I love how Mark Spector's like full, like a butterfly sting like a bee. Like I love that. I think we know who Layla is, and I hope that there is more explained about that because clearly she knows more than Mark Spector is at this current moment. So I think there was a lot of payoff from the first episode. It's going to be interesting to see what we learn from episode 2, how it pays off in 3, 4, 5, and 6. So I'm going to give a thumbs up to this one. I thought it was, like I said, I thought it was better than the first one. First one's good, but I like this one because it answered questions that I had, and I hope 3, 4, and 5, and 6 are better.
Yeah, I would give this a thumbs up as well. I don't think it. I preferred the first episode because it was far different than a lot of the other MCU stuff we've been getting. But this is still an enjoyable episode, and I can't wait to see where it goes from here.
Well, let's dig into some Daredevil now. Let's talk about episode 4 called In the Blood. And after you watched the episode, you DM'd me saying that that was the first time, like the ending of the episode, like that was the first time you ever saw a decapitation via a car door. Yeah, that's the kind of episode we're dealing with here. So what did you think, Jacob, of the episode?
All right. I'll get to that part in a little bit. I'll highlight the rest of the episode. I thought it was still pretty good. We get it's more. This one is more Daredevil centric. We get to see more of his vigilante stuff. He's interacting with Rosario Dawson again. She's kind of like his backup whenever he gets a little too beat up. She's the one who like tends to his wounds, and they can talk about what's going on and how he can be the symbol of hope. I like that we see a little more of the perspective of Wilson Fisk and how he operates his criminal organization, because we have the side that's run by the Russian group, but Kingpin wants full control, and we're starting to see him dive into their turf a little bit, and they don't like that too much, especially since Daredevil's starting to come on the scene and is interfering with their criminal activities. And I like that we got to see the softer side of Wilson Fisk as well. He has the attraction for the woman in the museum, and he asked her out on a date. And, we see that play out, and I'm like, okay, we're getting to see the sensitive side of Wilson Fisk before we get to see the nitty gritty of what makes him such a very scary person you don't want to mess with. There are some good action scenes in here. Every scene with Daredevil's pretty good. I will say, as a nitpick, with the scene when Rosario gets kidnapped by the Russians and Daredevil takes on the Russians in that car garage, the lighting was a little too dark for my liking. I'm like, okay, it's really cool. I like where you're going with this, but can you brighten it up just a little bit? Dark action scenes are cool and all, but you got to at least somewhat see. That's like the one issue I had with it. I like where it leads, and Rosario's like, "Oh man, we're in some deep, serious stuff," and he's like, "But we got it. But we got it. We're still gonna do what we do." And Rosario seems okay with that, and I like where that leads. And then we got the ending because the Russians interfere with the one guy interferes with Wilson's date, because his date was going on around the same time as Daredevil doing his thing. And he doesn't like that too much. He doesn't like that, his date got interrupted. And so we get to the end, and we got Wilson Fisk and that Russian guy in the car. They're talking for a few minutes about criminal stuff. And Wilson gets a call. He's like, "Yeah, right? No, wait a minute. Wilson's not in the same car." Might want to edit this out. The Russian guy's in the car with the other guy from Wilson's organization. I corrected myself there. Sorry about that. And the I'll say Fisk number 2. I forget the character's name. Gets a call.
Wesley, that's his name.
Wesley, thank you. He gets a call, and he's like, he's on the passenger side. Okay. Oh, does that mean Kingpin's going to show up? Sure enough, Kingpin opens the door, grabs that Russian guy, beats the crap out of him for a couple minutes. I'm like, oh, this is brutal. This is okay. I get it. He ruined the guy's date. Kingpin is upset. He's not going to do anything that crazy, is he? And then he just leans the guy towards the car, grabs the door, constantly slams it in his face multiple times, eventually to the point where it slices the guy's head off, signifying that he is starting a war with the Russians so he can take full control of Hell's Kitchen. And I am so excited to see more of this dark side of Kingpin going forward.
Yeah, say what you will about Kingpin, but he knows how to create a good work-life balance. Because when he's with Vanessa, no one interrupts him. That's the moral of the story. And I love the direction they take Kingpin here. He's not just a brute. Like is sophisticated, and he has a lot of help from Wesley. There's a great scene where they're at the dinner, and like he asks Vanessa if he likes the wine, and she's like, yes, I do. It was like Wesley picked it out. It was like, so clearly, like, the dude is making an attempt, even though it's not in his nature to be suave. He is at the very least attempting to be suave. I like that. I like the spirit of that. And also, I wanted to ask you, I know you weren't exactly a huge fan of the Karen Page, Ben Urich stuff. There was a lot more of it here. Are you warming up to it at all?
I think it was more interesting in this episode, as Karen, she's try to expose the wrongs that had happened to her, and I think her and Ben actually made for a pretty good pair in this episode. He's like the aging newspaper guy who's seen a lot, and he's kind of given up on hope, and she's the one that's kind of there to instill some confidence in him once again. And I like the back and forth that they had in this episode. And I'm curious where it's going to lead in the rest of the episodes. I thought the subplot was done better here in this episode.
Yeah, like I said, you just had to stick with it because it does get better, and it leads to something pretty substantial in the last couple of episodes, but I will say no more there. Now that we're about 4 episodes deep, or not about, we are 4 episodes deep, is there a particular episode that is your favorite? Is there a favorite moment? What do you think?
I would say my two favorite moments, actually my three favorite moments in Daredevil, the rain fight in episode 1, the hallway fight in episode 2, and Wilson Fisk going berserk at the end of episode 4 are easily the standouts in the series so far.
Exclusively in that order or not
Uh,
exclusively in that order?
I think those are just my three favorite moments. I think my favorite episode is still the first because I like the setup of Matt Murdock as a character, and I felt like that was the best balanced and best paced episode to date. I think if I had to rank the episodes, it'd be 1, then 2, then 4, and then 3 is my least favorite.
There's no real losers with a ranking like that. These are 4 quality episodes of television, in my
Yeah.
opinion. But anyway, looking forward to talking with you about episode 5 and the rest of the show. So let's dive into the main event of the evening. By the time this episode does air, we're in the middle of Holy Week, and it is about to be Easter Sunday. And this is a big deal as the faith-based dudes that we both are. So I thought it would be fun to talk about some faith-based movies because I'm particularly rough on faith-based movies because a lot of them are not great, especially in the pure flicks department, which I'm not going to criticize here. I have done so already. But when a faith-based movie is great, it can be fantastic. So I thought it would be fun to do a bit of a discussion on some of our favorites and maybe ones that maybe people haven't seen. So I'll get the ball rolling by talking about one of my personal favorite faith-based movies, Ben-Hur, the original, starring Charlton Heston. I covered this for the AFI project. I watched it in mid-2021. I hadn't seen it for a good while, and I forgot how epic that movie was. Like, that movie was just excellent. Like, the chariot race alone is worth going out of your way to see. But stay for the rest. And this isn't like one of those where Jesus is in the movie, but he doesn't appear often. It's not like you like be healed, whack, or something like that. You see Jesus literally. You see his feet and the back of his head. Like, that's the only times you see him. And the movie does a great job of saying, this is him. There he is. And then, of course, there's the crucifixion, and of course, but this isn't a hit you over the head with Jesus cameos movie. This is about Ben-Hur, and this is one of the true epic movies of the late 50s, early 60s. Jacob, have you seen this?
I have seen Ben-Hur. I've seen this movie several times, and I couldn't agree more. It is a fantastic movie. It's very long. It's almost 4 hours long,
Mm.
but it is worth every minute because the story is so gripping. It's such a compelling narrative of revenge and forgiveness Charlton Heston is probably at his all-time best in this role. I think he did an incredible job playing all of the layers of this character. I think the action is great, especially the chariot race. And, even if you just exclude the chariot race, it's still a compelling story from start to finish. And even the religious elements with Jesus, he's there and there's a good emphasis on it, but it's all about the journey of the character more so than, like you said, hitting it on the head with its message. And I think the movie is more powerful doing it in a more character centric way instead of being the overly preachy movie it's could have easily been.
I will say this: do not watch the remake. It is terrible. Just don't even bother. Morgan Freeman in dreadlocks, man. That's all I've got to say about it.
Yeah, the trailer turned me off. I have not even seen it.
But 3 years prior to Ben-Hur, we got a movie called The Ten Commandments, which also starred Charlton Heston. It was directed by the legendary Cecil B. DeMille. I don't know, Jacob, if you've seen this. I
I
haven't seen
have.
it in a while, but I remember loving it. This is another long one. It's just about 4 hours, 3 hours and 40 minutes to be specific, but it is an epic in every sense of the word.
Yeah, that movie is great too. I remember, I think the first time I watched it, I was intrigued to watch it as I was getting into classic cinema at the time, and I saw that every year around Easter, ABC would always air the Ten Commandments on TV to commemorate Easter. And I first watched it on one of its annual television runs. I think I first watched it, I'd like to say 2015 or 16. So I was already well in my teens when I saw this. And I thought it was great. I think the movie did a good job with doing the classic story of Moses. Again, Charlton Heston is terrific as Moses. Considering this came out in 1956, some of the visual effects in this movie still blow my mind with how they pulled it off back then, especially the parting of the Red Sea sequence. The first time I watched it, I'm like, this came out in 1956, and it looks just as good as what you'd make today. I'm like, wow. And they had so little technology back then. And I was just so impressed with how they did it. I think the cast in general is great. Yul Brynner as Ramesses is really good. I got to highlight Vincent Price as, I think, is Baca the Master Builder. Awesome role of his. There's just so many great talents in the film. I love the cinematography. The score is excellent. And it does a really good, respectful job with the story. A couple of embellishments in there, some of which are not really my favorite, like the whole Moses love triangle thing. I'll admit it's a little cringe, but the story itself is great. And considering this was Cecil B. DeMille's last movie, he definitely ended his career on a bang with this one.
Yeah, I mean, casting Vincent Price in anything is like almost a guarantee for it to be good. Like that man had the Midas touch, and like you said, Yul Brynner, but also Charlton Heston and Anne Baxter as Nefertiti. I thought she was great. She had one of my favorite scenes where, after Ramses and her son is stricken down, the whole firstborns thing. Ramses is so upset, he takes a sword, and Nefertiti's like, "Before you strike, I want to see his blood on your sword." And then he just throws the sword down, and I'm just like, wow, like he can't even do it. Like, just it's so good. It's so well done. And John Carradine is in this. He had a long career. This is a star-studded movie, and they, from what I've researched, they do pay a lot of good reverence to the source material, and I thought they did a really good job. It's certainly better than Exodus: Gods and Kings. Don't watch
Oh,
that. I hate
that
the.
movie is horrible.
You could do
It
Child
was
God, Child
that was what was Ridley thinking? Oh my gosh.
Oh, good.
And he not only did they make God a child, but he had temper tantrums whenever Moses disobeyed him.
I it makes me sad because Christian Bale and Joel Edgerton and Aaron Paul are all in it, and God bless their souls. They deserve so much better than this. And it
Yeah.
painting like Moses is like this is rebel like rebellion leader instead of like a messenger from God. It's just like, okay, the Bible can be up for interpretation to a certain degree. I understand that, but oh, not like this. Come on. I
Yeah.
the only amount of enjoyment I got from this movie is there's this channel I subscribe to called Upon Friar Review, where these two Franciscan friars react to religious things in media. Like, for example, they reacted to stuff like The Prince of Egypt, which I'll talk about that in a second, like The Prince of Egypt. And the YouTube comedian John B. Christ, who makes these hilarious, like Christian-based sketches. I'll recommend some to you, Jacob, off air, but he's really good. And they reacted to Exodus, Gods, and Kings, and they were horrified. Like at a certain point, the older like Franciscan friar just like grabbed his Bible and held it to him like it was a security blanket. And I'm just like, yeah, dude, I feel you. I feel all of the feelings you're feeling right now. But
I mean, I'll give the movie credit. It looks beautiful. I love the cinematography, but that's about it. The rest of the movie's just garbage.
well, let's talk about a much better Exodus movie, The Prince of Egypt. Now, I have a full review I did with Rachel and Durbin from Durbania, so be sure to look that up if you feel so inclined. But The Prince of Egypt is just incredible. This is DreamWorks' second movie after Ants. Consider the 1998 that they had. They had Ants and they had The Prince of Egypt. DreamWorks had arguably the best first year of any animation studios probably outside of Pixar. Like, and that's a bit of a bold take, but I stand by that. I mean, The Prince of Egypt is just fantastic in my opinion.
My unpopular opinion, because I know the Ten Commandments is held in high regard, I think the Prince of Egypt is better,
I
personally.
agree. I
I
agree
think
100%.
not only is the animation some of the best work I've seen from any animation studio, but I felt like DreamWorks took what the Ten Commandments did in 4 hours. They took it down, and I think the movie was like an hour and a half, hour 45 minutes. They were still able to tell a fantastic interpretation of this story, as faithful as they possibly could, with a few liberties in there. But even the liberties, I thought, made sense in the grand scheme of things. Like uh, the whole dynamic with Moses and his brother, I thought was done in such a compelling way, and how they executed that, and how that was a bit of a stumbling block for Moses to get around, but he still, had the confidence to do what he was instructed to do. And I think this was such a fantastic movie. I think of all the faith based movies we're covering, this is probably my favorite one. It's easily my favorite DreamWorks movie, hands down. I think the songs are probably some of my favorites outside of Disney. Like, there's so many great songs this movie. Deliver Us, When You Believe, the Plague song. Oh my gosh, that song was absolutely chilling and devastating, and the imagery is just so good. This is easily like how you do a Bible story right. Get the right crew of people, get people who care about this story, and do it in a way where anybody can watch it. Don't sugarcoat it to young kids. Keep the darker elements of the story and still tell a satisfying story that will resonate with people young and old, whether you're religious or not. This is such a fantastic movie that did its story right.
As seemingly true in most cases, the stuff made for kids is somehow more mature than the stuff made for adults. But let's move on from as Gods and Kings and all that. I wanted to, because I looked through some IMDb lists, and I wanted to throw a couple of movies out there that I've seen, but I don't know, Jacob, if maybe you have not seen. Have you ever heard of the movie Godspell?
Never even heard of it.
Well, it was actually a musical. I believe Stephen Sondheim created it. I'm pretty
Oh,
sure. And this is basically a modern, well, modern in the terms of this was made in the mid 70s. So a mid 70s take on the Gospel of Saint Matthew. And for some that may be like, it's a recipe for disaster. Trust me, it's actually quite good. And there was a film adaptation of it made in 1973. It starred Victor Garber, who would star in a lot of stuff. He was Jennifer Garner's dad in Alias. Like if you need like someone to play like a CIA type, you call Victor Garber. That's who you talk to. And the songs in this are fantastic. Save the People, the opening song, Prepare Ye the Way of the Lord. Oh, bless the Lord, my soul. It's a super underrated faith-based movie, and I can't recommend it enough to everybody.
and you said this was the story set in modern day, pretty much?
Mid 70s New York City, if that
Okay. Well,
gives,
modern day at the time.
yeah, modern at the
Um,
time, yes.
um, you describing that reminds me of another faith-based movie I've seen before, Jesus Christ Superstar. Are you familiar with that?
Familiar, I have not seen. I know
Yeah,
the
that came
TV
out
shows.
in the 70s. Yeah, it was directed by Norman Jewison, who also did Fiddler on the Roof, which is a great movie in
Oh,
itself. It's pretty much the story of Jesus. It's weird because it's set in biblical times, but the characters are dressed like hippies from the 70s, and they pretty much sing like hard rock, pretty much. It is so bizarre, yet I still thought it told the story pretty well with rock and roll glamorized versions of these characters. It's actually a strange movie, yet still a highly enjoyable one at the same time. I definitely recommend it if you hadn't seen it.
yeah, I'll definitely check it out. And even though it's an entirely different religion, shout out to Fiddler on the Roof. It is one of the best faith-based movies ever made. It is
Uh,
another long one at just about 3 hours, but it is one of the greatest musicals of all time. It's actually a production of it is coming to my local area, and I'm going to be going to see that very soon. So I'll tell everybody about that when I do see it. But there's another older faith-based movie about the life of Jesus. It was released in 1965, and this is one of my father's favorites. It's called The Greatest Story Ever Told. Uh, we were talking about the length of Ben-Hur and Ben-Hur and the Ten Commandments. Take a wild guess at how long this one is, Jacob.
probably about 4 hours.
4 hours, 20 minutes.
Oh, wow. That's longer than the Zack Snyder's Justice League, if I'm not mistaken. Longer by
well,
20 minutes.
well, the cast is actually really good. Jesus is played by the late Max von Sydow. May he rest in peace. John the Baptist is played by Charlton Heston. Again, rest in peace. You got Pat Boone. You got, let me read some. You got Van Heflin, Martin Landau, Angela Lansbury. It's like a Roddy McDowell is in here as Matthew, which is like, I struggle sometimes to see Roddy McDowell as anyone other than like as an ape in like the Planet of the Apes movies. I don't know about anyone else out there. Uh, Donald Pleasance plays Satan, which I mean that's a great choice there. The late Sidney Poitier is Simon of Cyrene. This is an excellent cast. Telly Savalas is Pontius Pilate. Like I said, this was directed by George Stevens, with some scenes shot by David Lean, who also directed a little movie you may have heard of called Lawrence of Arabia, though he is uncredited. It is a very long movie. However, there is an intermission, so if you do watch it, plan it around there. That's all I will say. But it's definitely one of the better movies about Jesus's life that I personally have ever seen. I've actually have not seen it in quite some time. I do want to explore that one day.
I have actually seen that movie. I saw it once on TCM, and I think the movie's fine personally. It's beautifully shot. I do like the cast. I think it did the story pretty good. But I think personally, I've seen better film adaptations of the story of Jesus. I think the big thing that distracts me, honestly, you talked about the all-star cast of this movie, and there are some great talent in this movie. Max von Sydow, Charlton Heston, Donald Pleasance. But then there were just some castings in this movie that just did not make much sense to me, and it took me out of the movie fast. Jesus healed somebody from, I think, blindness or something like that. The woman is played by Shelley Winters, and I know her best. I don't know if you are familiar with this, Ryan, but she was Ma Grogan from Pete's Dragon. That's what I know her best. Bill Sale right here. And so she gets healed. She's like, I'm cured. I'm cured. I'm like, I don't think people talk like that in biblical times. Took me out of the movie. And then we got the whole thing of Jesus' crucifixion. That's supposed to be this serious, somber moment of Jesus dying on the cross to atone for our sins. And then while that's going on, John Wayne shows up as what's that guy's name? That one soldier who said, "Truly, this man was the Son of God." And hearing John Wayne in his brawl going, "Truly, this man was the Son of God." You can't watch that with a straight face. As serious as that is, Jesus' crucifixion, and you got John Wayne showing up for no reason.
God bless John Wayne, but I mean, good Lord, the man had a very distinct voice. You might as well put Christopher Walken in there. It's like, truly, this man was the Son of God.
That's more sophisticated than John Wayne.
Truly, this man was the Son of God.
I think your John Wayne impression's better than mine.
And it's not super great, but it does have its moments. It's mostly based off of Joker from Full Metal Jacket. And you, John Wayne, is it me?
I don't
Definitely.
know if there was another Jesus-centered movie that came out around the same time. Are you familiar with the film King of Kings?
Yes, that one was. I can't remember who plays Jesus. I
Jeffrey Hunter, who,
That's him.
funny enough, starred in The Searchers with John Wayne. And that movie, I think, did it a lot better. What's fascinating is most of the movie is actually told in perspectives of like the Roman soldiers or some of the people that some of the regular people, and Jesus is only kind of there in chunks. But I think that more nuanced approach to it made the movie all the more fascinating. I do think this one has a pretty good cast. Jeffrey Hunter, I think some people struggled to take him seriously because he was considered like the teenage idol actor at the time. And there's a couple times where that can get a little distracting, like whenever Jesus is healing characters, there's these weird close-ups of his eyes, and it was like unintentionally creepy to watch, I will say that. But I still thought he gave a good performance. I think there's some good cinematography. Plus, it's narrated by Orson Welles, and you can't go wrong with that.
Yeah, I mean, you really can't go wrong with it. It's been a minute since I have seen King of Kings, but I remember loving it. This is yet another one of my dad's favorites, and that's one I definitely should get back around to at some point. But and a movie that's often talked about in terms of, I guess, the life of Jesus that is often very controversial is The Passion of the Christ from Mel Gibson. I've not actually seen it. I was planning on talking about it actually with Rachel for this Easter, and we're actually going to be doing the Chronicles of Narnia, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. But at first I was like, should I? And then I was like, no, I should probably put that off. But Jacob, have you seen it? What did you think?
I have seen The Passion of the Christ, and considering that movie gets a lot of controversy from some people are like the movie's too violent. Some people think it's not doing the message well. I've seen it twice, and I personally love it. It's actually my personal favorite of the Jesus movies that we're talking about in this because, yeah, the movie is a hard watch because it chronicles the suffering of Jesus. Like, before going to the cross, like the many beatings and whippings, and then they place the crown on his head, and that whole ordeal to the whole crucifixion. It's 2 hours of that, and some people thought that was too excessive. But you look at what's recorded in the Bible, and Jesus did not have a pleasant time before his death. It was all brutal stuff, and I felt like it was bold of Mel Gibson to encapsulate that throughout the story to show what he was willing to go through for all our sins. And it definitely leaves you thinking. I think the movie strengths is due to, how thought provoking the material is. I think the direction is well done. Jesus in this movie is played by Jim Caviezel, and he is fantastic in this role. What's really cool about this movie is it's actually a foreign language film. Characters are actually speaking in the original dialect of, that time. Like characters speak in Hebrew, characters speak in Aramaic, Latin. Many of these languages are dead languages now. So to me, it's incredible that Mel Gibson brought these languages that nobody speaks anymore, uh, and all the actors had to learn this language in order to make the movie as authentic and raw as possible. And I give him utmost respect for that. Yeah, there's some aspects that don't work for me. The way the movie presents Satan, I thought was very weird. Satan looked a lot like David Bowie in this movie, if I gotta be honest, and it was such a distraction. But there's so many good elements in this movie that the few negatives I do have definitely the positives definitely outweigh the few minor gripes that I do have with this movie. It's definitely a difficult to rewatch movie because of how brutal it is, but it's definitely worth watching, especially if you're in the faith-based community. I think there's so many good things to appreciate in this movie, whether the filmmaking, the attention to detail, and the performances and the thought-provoking messages.
Yeah, Mel Gibson is kind of an easy guy to joke about and hate, and to a certain extent, I agree. However, when the dude directs, he really directs. Movies like Hacksaw Ridge and Braveheart, which I will be watching for the first time very soon. So I hope you all
You
stay.
haven't seen Braveheart?
No, I'm going to cure.
Wow.
That's going.
That movie is great. I can't wait to see your reaction on that. That movie is incredible.
That's going on the channel very soon. So don't all kill me, please. I will watch it.
I was more shocked than anything
But
else.
um, but I give Mel Gibson all the credit in the world. Like, he makes the movies that he wants to make and infuses all of his influence in them. I give him all the credit. Like, I consider him along the same vein as Clint Eastwood. That when they stop making movies, I will consider that a loss because we'll probably never see their like again. I think that's fair to say.
Yeah, every movie I've seen Mel direct is fantastic. The Passion of the Christ, Hacksaw Ridge, Braveheart are all great movies. He's actually currently working on a sequel to The Passion of the Christ, which is more centered around the resurrection. I think it's going to be called The Resurrection of the Christ. Mel's supposed to direct, and Jim Caviezel is actually going to reprise his role as Jesus in that movie. I think it's going to start production real soon. And considering how much I love the first movie and considering how much I'm a fan of Mel Gibson as a director, I think this has the potential to be. I don't think it'll be near as hard to watch as The Passion of the Christ, but I think it'll still be just as powerful if Mel Gibson's going to use the same tactics that he did filmmaking on this movie.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, wait, Jesus, like, died at the end of Passion of the Christ. Like, what sequel is there to make? But when
Yeah.
you said it's about the resurrection, like, okay, that actually does make sense. So, like I said, I'll definitely be getting around to Braveheart. That review will be up on the channel very soon because subtly I'm making my way through the 90s and movies that I haven't seen from that decade. So that's kind of what I'm doing right now. And Braveheart is on the list. That is all that I will say right here and now. But I don't know if you've seen this one, but I wanted to touch on yet on a similar Jesus-based movie that was equally as controversial, and it's Martin Scorsese's The Last Temptation of Christ. I don't know if you've seen this one or not,
I have.
but researching this and seeing clips online, wow, this is honestly a movie that deserves to be have a movie made about it. Because there were like bombings at screenings of this. Like people were intense about this movie. And what I have seen, I haven't been a particularly big fan of. I should watch the whole thing and I will one day. But Jacob, what were your thoughts?
I have an interesting reaction on this because when I started the movie, I came in expecting to hate it because of the negative controversy that it does have, and the beginning was a little bit rough. Uh, the movie greatly wants to humanize Jesus and de-emphasize the spiritual connections that it does have, and I was just like, I don't know if I like this. I don't know if it's good to make Jesus a flawed human. That just seems a little bit blasphemous, I guess, is for lack of a better words. Because we see scenes at the beginning where Jesus is clearly thinking about doing it with Mary Magdalene, and he's making crosses for the Roman Empire, and I'm like, um, okay, I don't know where you're going with this, but I'm not that crazy about it. But then once it dives more into Jesus as a character and kind of like his whole struggles a little bit to try to fulfill his father's plan, it got more interesting. The movie definitely takes some odd choices at first about where it's going with this, especially the whole aspect with Mary Magdalene. I'm like, I see why people are upset with this, but it actually does end on a satisfactory note. It definitely felt like Martin Scorsese at the end of the day was trying to respect Christianity with the material. He just took an unorthodox route with it. It's more like, what would Jesus do if he was tempted all the way of the cross? And would he be tempted or would he fulfill his father's plan at the end? And I liked the questions that it raised. It's an odd choice, but I respect the craft at the end of the day. I think it's one where I respect the film more than I love it.
Yeah, it definitely feels like Scorsese may have worked the Christian community maybe a little too hard because there was a lot of people. Like I think I remember Mother Teresa saying that this was just horrible. Like I don't know the exact quote, but from what I've seen quotes of, or what I've seen clips of, excuse me, I've definitely said to myself, okay, this is incredibly unorthodox, but at the end of the day, I feel like Scorsese was trying to say, hey, like he was tempted till the end and he remained resolute. And but at the same time, it was just strange how he went about it because it's not like Jesus doubted him. If my Bible knowledge is correct, and I think it is to a certain extent, Jesus did doubt. I believe he said in the Mount of Olives, if it is not your death, if it is not your plan, then let it pass through me. I'm sure it's more eloquent than that, but I'm sure you all get my point. So he did doubt, but not to the point where he's like doing it with Mary Magdalene and like saying, "Oh no, I'm not him. What are you talking about?" It just I feel like Scorsese made a lot of choices that rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. Like John Wayne rode off into the sunset. The hero got out at the end, so at least there's that. But it was a complicated road getting there. That's what it sounds like, at least.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting movie to talk about. Honestly, Scorsese did a lot with this movie that I do respect. To me, this is a movie I'd rather watch than most low budget faith based movies made by Christian filmmakers like your Pure Flix movies. At least this has something to say, at least. And the performances in this are all really good. I gotta highlight Willem Dafoe as Jesus, who was fantastic, by the way, and Harvey Keitel as Judas Iscariot. Those are the two standout performances in this movie, and they are both fantastic.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, you couldn't get two better actors like for a role like that than Willem Dafoe and Harvey Keitel. You could is like those are definitely choice actors for those respective roles. But like I said, I definitely want to watch this movie in full one day, and I'll definitely make a video on it, and Passion of the Christ as well, because even though I mean it's basically the Passion. I know exactly what happens, but I kind of stayed away from it for a while. But at a certain point, I'm just gonna have to like suck it up and actually watch it.
Yeah, definitely let me know what your thoughts are on both of those movies.
Well, anyway, what are all of yours favorite Easter movies or favorite faith-based movies if you are so inclined to that? Leave them in the comments. We would love to read what you would have to say about that. And well, that's another episode in the books. I thank you all so much for watching. Jacob, thank you so much for being here as always. Where can people find you?
People can find me on Letterboxd, Twitter, and Facebook, and of course my two YouTube channels. My main channel where I do movie reviews, TV reviews, ranking videos, and other fun stuff along the way. I got so much content coming on the channel. I had a little bit of a break this past weekend because I was out camping and I don't like premiering videos when I'm out of town. But there are some videos you can check out on my channel. Like I said, I've recently reviewed Fantastic Mr. Fox from a Wes Anderson director project. I reviewed Springtime with Fru, the Winnie the Pooh film for my Celebrating Disney series. I've This is a Monday night as we're recording this, and the video that just dropped on my channel was for my review of Fantastic Beasts and where to find them. And I've also have a review of Meatballs coming to the channel as well, along with a review for Cloud Atlas on my series of Wachowski videos. And a quick plug-in, Thursday night on my channel at 8 o'clock, Ryan will be on my channel, where we'll be talking about the infamous 2015 sci-fi epic from the creators of the Matrix movies, their magnum opus movie, Jupiter Ascending, starring Mila Kunis and Eddie Redmayne. I can't wait to talk about this amazing movie. Aren't you, Ryan?
Oh, it's going to be so much fun. It's going to be more of a roast than a review, but it's going to be amazing to talk about it with you, and I'm looking forward to that. It's going to be Thursday at 8 o'clock Eastern over on Jacob's
Eastern,
channel,
yeah.
which I will leave that in his second channel where he does book reviews and read-throughs, which is a lot of fun, and his socials all in the description of the video. I highly recommend that you go check him out. As for this channel, on Monday, I dropped my Twilight Zone vlog review for the Christmas special, The Night of the Meek. It's one of the best Twilight Zone episodes ever. I recommend everyone go out of their way to watch it. I also have, like I said, my Rocketeer video that dropped on Sunday, so be sure to check that out if you're so inclined. I'll also be covering Fantastic Beasts: Secrets of Dumbledore when I do get around to seeing it. And I also want to check out Father Stew, and along with that and Everything Everywhere All at Once. And then on Sunday, on Easter Sunday to be specific, I made a notion to it earlier, but myself and Rachel from Rachel's Reviews are going to take a deep dive into the Chronicles of Narnia, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, the film from 2005, which is a lot better than people give credit for. So stay tuned for all of that. And if you like this video, please be sure to leave a like and hit the subscribe button and click the bell to allow notifications. That way when a new video drops, you'll be the first to know about it. That's Jacob Martin. My name is Ryan Cam. God bless all of you. We'll see you in the next one. Take care.